Hi guys, my name is Maddie, and today we're going to be learning about section 4.2 in our textbooks, which is titled Introduction to Voting. So in this section, we're going to be discussing the 4 different voting methods and how we can make those voting methods fair. So voting is quite prevalent in our society, particularly in the United States and how our government is run. So we live in what's called a democratic republic, which means that we, the people, hold elections to vote the representatives that we want into office. However, it might surprise you to find out that when we are voting people into office, it's not as simple as just tallying up the ballots. So we have 4 different voting methods. They're called the plurality method of voting. Next, we have the board account method, plurality with elimination, and then pairwise comparison of voting. So we're going to start off with the plurality method of voting. So this is when each voter votes for one candidate and the candidate with the most votes wins. This is probably the simplest of all the voting methods. However, it's important to distinguish for this one that there is a difference between majority and plurality. So we're going to go over here for a second. So I've defined majority as being more than 50% of the population votes for a specific candidate, and then plurality is when the person or issue with the most votes wins. So this is important. This basically means that just because someone has the most votes, it doesn't mean they have the majority of the votes. So the winning candidate does not have to have a majority of the votes to win. It's a little bit tricky, but it gets more comfortable as we continue on. Next, we have the board account method. So this is a little bit trickier than the plurality method. It's got a little bit more steps involved. So this is when each placement is awarded a particular number of points. So for example, first place gets 3 points, second place gets 2, and so on. And then the points are then multiplied by the number of votes and then added together to determine the winner. So it's a little bit trickier. It gets more difficult if you have a lot of candidates, but if you have like 3 or 4, it's totally okay. Next, we have plurality with elimination. It's similar to the board account method, however, it takes into consideration alternate candidates. So this method basically involves a trickle-down effect in which candidates are eliminated until a winner is ultimately found. And then last but not least, we have the pairwise comparison of voting, and this is often referred to as head-to-head method. And it's basically in the title, so each candidate is compared to one another, and they are awarded points based on their wins and losses, and then whoever has the greatest number of points wins. So all of these voting methods are different, and they all, of course, have limitations, which are going to be discussed more in the handout, but a big question that comes up is how can we determine which voting method is the fairest? And the truth is, there really is no voting system that's completely fair, but there are 4 items that are in the fairness criteria that we can use to assess them. So the first one we discussed is called majority criterion. I'm going to highlight this. So this basically just states that the candidate who receives more than 50% of the vote or of the first place votes is the winner. Next, we have the monotonicity criterion, which basically states that if a particular candidate wins an election, then that candidate will also win the election if the only change in the voters' preferences is that the supporters of a different candidate change their votes to support candidate A, so that first candidate. Third, we have the Condorcet criterion, which basically just means that a candidate who wins all possible head-to-head matchups should win when all candidates appear on a ballot. So this kind of goes it coincides with the pairwise comparison of voting. And then last but not least, we have the independence of irrelevant alternatives. Oh no, we have the independence of irrelevant alternatives, which basically states that if a candidate wins an election, that the winner should remain the winner in case there's any recount in which any losing candidates withdraw from the race. So despite all these 4 criteria, it's impossible to hit all 4 when using a voting system. And we know this because of Kenneth Arrow's impossibility theorem, which basically just states that there is no voting method involving 3 or more choices that satisfies the fairness criterion. So every vote isn't perfect. We do our best to make it fair, but there's so many outliers and so many situations where things can go wrong that it's just impossible to hit all 4 of these criteria in one method of voting. So in conclusion, there is no perfect vote, which means that there's also no fair vote, but we do our best to make it so. And it's also important to understand these voting methods so we can understand how elections work, and so we know what it means when officials are elected into office, and so we can understand our rights just a little bit better and how our government works. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys take a look at the handout and the problem sheet that I made. But thank you so much for listening and hope you have a good day.